So now that we've gone through how to install Tails on a VirtualBox environment on a Windows desktop, it's now time to talk about how to install Tails using USB drives. This is the preferred method of installing Tails. You can install Tails on a DVD or SD card. However, we won't cover those in this course. You can find those resources online to learn how to do that. But in this one, we're going to be using USB drives. Now, if you really do want to get the true anonymity and security from Tails, you have to use the USB drives or SD or DVD, any one of those three. But you can't be using it in like a VirtualBox environment. It has some serious issues with security that you will not be able to avoid if you're trying to do anything more than basic stuff on the deep web. So be sure you're following this guide closely. For the next part of this section, we're going to hop back over to the desktop and go through the installation process of Tails on a USB drive. So back over here on the desktop, we're going to start by using our browser to go to the Tails website again, and that is just that tails.boem.org. And just like we did in the last lecture, we're going to hit over to this right hand side on where it says install Tails. And we're going to go ahead and just follow this Tails installation assistant guide. Instead of hitting that download only, we'll just follow this. So let's go ahead and start the journey. We're going to be installing Tails from Windows. So if you have other systems you're installing it from, you can use that. Otherwise, select the Windows option. And then we're going to want to go ahead and select the right hand side here where it says install from Windows. And you can see you're going to need 2 USB sticks, at least 4 gigabytes. It'll take a full hour to download Tails, depending on your internet connection, of course. And to get the full install, they say about an hour, but a little less than that. You can also see the literature here on how to get Tails on a DVD or how to run Tails in a virtual machine like we did in the last lecture. So we'll go ahead and select this install from Windows option, and it will walk us through the basics of the installation. So obviously we have already downloaded the file for the Tails system. It's here in our downloads under Tails. You can see we have the ISO there. That's really all you need to download. So if you already have that from the last lecture, you're good to go. But if you don't, you will need to download it again. And now that we have Tails downloaded, we will go ahead and get a USB installer to make a bootable USB. This one is a universal USB installer. I'm not going to actually use that one. The one I'm going to use that is a little easier to use is called Rufus. So you can just Google search Rufus if you want to find that. It'll be that first one there. And we'll pull that up and get to this. And here on the screen, we'll just scroll down to download, and I will just hit this 2.14. I actually hit the portable one. That way you can actually carry it around with you if you want to have a USB drive maker, a bootable USB drive maker. Rufus is pretty great at that, so we'll download it really quickly and then we'll run it once it is downloaded. And we'll say yes there. And then we'll just continue to follow the guide. Now you can download this one and just follow their guide if you would like. Really no difference in this part. For creating the drive and getting it together. So once we have this download created, we are creating what's called an intermediate Tails, or intermediary Tails. So we will actually install another Tails. We can read through the rest of the instructions really quickly just so you know what we will be doing. So these instructions you will have to print or otherwise save, because once you reboot your computer and plug in the USB, you won't have this web page. Then we'll start up the Tails, and it'll start normally. We'll go into it, and then we'll actually install. We'll actually use the install by cloning button to get it finalized. So let's open up our Rufus here, and then we will go ahead and plug in our USB to get that all ready. So I have my USB plugged in now. You'll see under the device, it should automatically detect your device plugged in. This one is already named Tails because I have put Tails on it before. You can leave the file system on exFAT, or if you want to change it, it doesn't really matter. I'll actually change it back to the default. I wouldn't really mess with any of these, and you can change the name of it as well. I like naming it Tails. And you will have to create a bootable disk. You want to make sure you notice this area and select that little disk icon. And from there, you're going to actually go to your downloads and get the Tails ISO. Open that up. and it should have it all ready all together. And if you are ready, and make sure you have saved any files off that USB if there are any, as this will erase them all, you can go ahead and hit start. Sometimes it comes up with that screen saying it needs to install some extra things, so we'll just go ahead and say yes. Saying it'll clear the drive, we'll say okay, and then it will begin installing Tails. It'll take a moment, but it shouldn't be too long here. And basically, once that is done, you can follow the rest of this. We're not going to actually go through it because doing it and trying to record it is kind of impossible, because you can't really record the Tails desktop that easily. So really all you need to do is you boot it up on your computer, and then you go just follow the instructions, application Tails installer, and just install by cloning. Now technically your Tails would be fine if you just plugged it in and ran it from that one USB stick. You don't need to get a second one, but this just ensures your Tails is actually the right Tails and is safe. Sometimes if you were victim to like a man-in-the-middle attack or something like that, they could send you a copy of Tails that actually isn't verified and that has tracking software somewhere in it or something like that. So I mean, if you verify your download, if you know how to check the hash on it or the checksum of it all, you can actually use that to verify your download. Otherwise you can use this method. But even if you skipped this, while it's not recommended, your Tails is still working normally. It's not like this step is required. So after you get that first one done, which it is almost done creating, you plug it into your computer, and you'll need to boot from the USB. How you do that is different per computer, so you'll need to look it up. Usually while it's booting up, you press like F10 or F12, something like that, or even delete maybe. Depends on the type of computer you have, but you can just Google that really quickly. Just Google the type of your computer and then how to boot from USB. And once you've done that, you basically have Tails on a USB drive. Now if you ever want to upgrade your USB drive or upgrade your Tails, you could do it through this area on Tails, but we will talk about that a little bit later in this course. But other than that, that's the basics of installing Tails on a USB. Not terribly complicated. If you have any questions about this whole process, I recommend just going to their website. They have a lot of documentation on how to install it and some issues you might come into while installing it. So just follow these guides. They're very good, lots of pictures, very easy to understand. So if you have any questions or any issues, just head over to this tails.boehm.org. Otherwise, go ahead and head to the next lecture where we will go through the initial setup of Tails and get you familiar with the desktop and navigating around the system.